Welcome to Life Stories. Imagine spending your entire life building something only to have it taken away in a single, unexpected moment. What if everything you've worked for, every decision you've made, was suddenly questioned by the people who should support you the most? This is the reality for Sarah. She spent 7 years saving for a dream home, a quiet space to finally call her own. But when she shared her success with her family, instead of celebrating with her, they saw it as something to take. They wanted her to sacrifice everything she had built for them. But this time, Sarah isn't backing down. The real question is, can family truly ask for everything? Or is it time for Sarah to choose herself once and for all? Let's dive into her journey of sacrifice, boundary pushing, and ultimately discovering what it means to live for herself. Sarah had always lived a life of balance, measured, calculated, and carefully controlled. At 31, she was a financial advisor at a prominent firm in Portland, Oregon, where the world of numbers was her sanctuary. She had no desire for the flash and excess her peers seemed to crave. No fancy vacations, no expensive handbags. Everything she owned, every dollar she saved, was part of her grand plan. A modest house in the quiet woods, far from the hustle of city life. Sarah had been saving for 7 years, a long, steady march toward freedom. Her childhood, however, had been nothing like the calm order of her adult life. Growing up, she had always felt like a shadow in the background, while her older sister, Rachel, stood at the center of the spotlight. Rachel had the golden hair, the dazzling smile, the effortless charm that made her the star of every family gathering. And as much as Sarah hated to admit it, the favoritism was palpable. From the lavish birthday parties to the all-expenses-paid vacations, everything had always been for Rachel. Sarah never blamed her sister, but it was clear from an early age that she had to fight for everything she wanted. No one was going to hand her success on a silver platter. If she wanted a future, she had to build it herself. And that's exactly what she did. While Rachel played the role of the perfect daughter, married young to a man named Jason, and had 2 children, Ellie and Brandon, Sarah quietly worked her way up, saving every penny to eventually buy a home of her own. A place where she could breathe freely without the suffocating expectations of family hovering over her. But when Sarah's dream was finally within reach, when the savings were stacked high enough, when the house listings started to look promising, she had no idea how drastically her world would change. It was a Sunday evening when the storm started. The family had gathered at their parents' house, as they often did. The scent of garlic bread wafted through the air, and the familiar hum of light-hearted conversation filled the room. But Sarah wasn't listening to the idle chatter. She was scrolling through property listings, her heart racing a little faster as the image of her dream home, a small wooden house nestled among the trees, appeared on her screen. A place that could be hers. "What's making you smile like that?" Rachel's voice broke through Sarah's reverie, and Sarah looked up, hesitating for just a moment. "I'm house hunting," she said, trying to keep her tone casual, "planning to buy next month." The room fell into silence, as if Sarah had just announced she was moving to the moon. Her mother set her fork down with an audible click, and Rachel's eyes widened, her mouth dropping open in disbelief. "Buying a house by yourself?" her mother asked, her voice coated with concern, but Sarah could feel the undertone of something more, the sharp, possessive tone of someone who expected better, someone who thought Sarah's life was supposed to be lived for others, not for herself. "Yes, Mom," Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady. "I've been saving for 7 years. It's my money. No debt. No loans." Before her mother could respond, Rachel interjected, her voice rising slightly. "I'm not saying you can't buy a house, but you need to think ahead. A house should be for family, not just for you alone." "Who exactly are these others?" Sarah asked, half joking, trying to lighten the tension. But the uneasy glances exchanged between Rachel and her mother made her stomach twist. Something was off. The next night, as Sarah sat preparing her financial documents for the mortgage application, a text from her mother came through. It was a link to a 4-bedroom house in a neighborhood with great schools, a house Sarah knew was far from what she had in mind. "Look at this one, sweetie," the text read. "It has plenty of space for everyone. The kids would love it." Sarah stared at the listing. She had never mentioned wanting a house that big. She didn't need a house for a family. She needed a home, a quiet refuge for herself. But as her mother's texts kept coming, each one urging her to check out more family-friendly homes, Sarah realized what was happening. They weren't suggesting homes for her. They were planning for their own future in her home. She stood in front of her mirror, staring at the financial documents in her hand, feeling an unsettling realization settle in her gut. Her family, especially Rachel, didn't want her to live her life for herself. They wanted her to use her hard-earned success to prop up the family that had always depended on her. They didn't see her as someone with the right to choose her own path. They saw her as the fallback plan for their failures. The next Sunday, when Sarah finally made the decision to tell her family that she had bought her own house, a 2-bedroom home in the quiet town of Monroe, her mother's face went pale. Rachel sat there, stiff as a board, unable to mask the shock. "You bought it?" Her mother's voice trembled. "You've already signed everything?" "Yes," Sarah said, her heart pounding. "I bought it last week. I'm moving in at the end of the month." Her mother's face crumpled with disbelief. "How could you make such a decision without consulting us? We've been looking for a house for you, Sarah. We even found one near the kids' school with plenty of space for everyone." Rachel's voice, sharp and cold, cut through the room. "We thought you'd at least consult us. You're the only one with financial stability. It's only right that you help." Sarah's mind whirled as the weight of their words pressed down on her. Her family wasn't concerned about her happiness. They were concerned with how her success could benefit them. Rachel, with her struggles in a cramped apartment, had always found ways to use Sarah's resources to ease her own life. But this was too much. Her mother's voice, now rising in pitch, snapped Sarah back to reality. "You're betraying us, Sarah. You know the house on Maple Street is perfect for the family. Your life is stable. You're the one who should help." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Was this it? Was she really about to let go of everything she had worked for, just to appease their expectations? She turned to Rachel, her voice trembling with the anger she could no longer suppress. "No one ever asked me what I wanted. I've spent my entire life being the backup plan for you. And now, you want me to give up the one thing that's mine." Rachel's face tightened, her voice lowering. "You're being selfish, Sarah. You're tearing the family apart over a house." The words stung. But something inside Sarah snapped. The guilt, the years of being the quiet, reliable sister, it all melted away. How far would you go to protect your own happiness? Can family expectations really define your life, or is it time to break free? Sarah stood there, looking at the faces of her family, expecting, demanding, and judging. But for the first time in her life, she didn't feel guilty for choosing herself. She turned away from the table, her chair scraping sharply against the floor, and walked out the door. The air outside felt cooler, but for the first time in years, she felt free. The family's voice echoed in her head, but Sarah knew she was ready for the next step. She was about to make the most important choice of her life, one that would change everything. And the next day, she sealed her decision by signing the contract. But was it too late for reconciliation? What would her family do next? Sarah had just stepped into her new life, but was it really the end, or was it just the beginning of a battle she wasn't prepared for? Would you sacrifice your own dreams to keep the peace in your family, or is it time to put yourself first? As Sarah closed the door behind her, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the start of something far more complicated. The days that followed were the longest Sarah had ever lived. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. She spent her mornings in her small garden, tending to the basil and rosemary plants she had carefully selected for their fragrance. The afternoons were filled with the soft hum of her laptop, as she worked through her financial plans and consulted clients from the peaceful retreat she had built for herself. It was a life she had worked tirelessly for, and for the first time, she felt like it was hers. But even as the days passed, a gnawing sense of unease lingered at the back of her mind. It wasn't just the silence of the house, nor the absence of family dinners or phone calls. It was the feeling that something was unfinished, unresolved. She couldn't shake the thought of her mother's voice, sharp and disappointed, the way Rachel had accused her of tearing the family apart. It was a weight she hadn't anticipated, the sting of betrayal cutting deeper than she cared to admit. Every time her phone buzzed, Sarah hesitated before picking it up, her heart sinking at the thought of another message from her family. But for days, nothing came. Her inbox remained empty, her voicemail silent. It was as if they had all chosen to let her go, to pretend she was no longer part of their lives. And yet, Sarah couldn't help but feel the weight of their absence pressing on her chest, the hollow space where their expectations had once been. One evening, as the golden light of the setting sun filtered through the trees, Sarah sat on her porch with a cup of tea in her hands. The warmth of the cup felt comforting against her palms, a small act of normalcy in the midst of all the change. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the fresh air, listening to the rustling leaves. The sound of the world around her was soothing, but there was something else. A faint noise, soft but persistent. The doorbell rang. For a moment, Sarah didn't move. She wasn't expecting anyone, and she had become accustomed to the silence that now filled her life. But the bell rang again, this time a little more insistently. Her heart skipped a beat, and she rose from her chair, walking slowly toward the door. When she opened it, there stood Rachel. Her hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, her eyes red and tired, as if she hadn't slept in days. Behind her, Ellie and Brandon stood silently, their small faces looking up at Sarah with a mixture of uncertainty and hope. "I wasn't sure if I should knock," Rachel said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I thought maybe." Sarah stood frozen in the doorway, unsure of what to do. She had imagined this moment in her mind, what it would be like to see Rachel again, to face her after everything that had happened. But this wasn't what she had imagined. This wasn't the triumphant reconciliation she had hoped for, or the bitter confrontation she had feared. It was something else entirely. Something raw. Without a word, Sarah stepped aside, allowing them to enter. The air inside the house felt suddenly heavy, filled with the tension of unspoken words. They sat in silence at the kitchen table, the kids playing quietly in the corner, the faint sound of their laughter doing little to break the weight of the moment. Sarah glanced at Rachel, who was staring down at her hands, her lips pressed together in a tight line. "I'm sorry, Sarah," Rachel said, her voice breaking the silence at last. "I shouldn't have expected you to just give in. I was selfish. I thought you'd always be there for us, like you always have." Sarah took a deep breath, the anger and frustration she had been holding in for days rising up inside her. But there was something else, too. Something softer. A sense of exhaustion, as if she were finally ready to let go of the burden she had been carrying for so long. "You never asked me what I wanted, Rachel," Sarah said quietly, her voice steady but firm. "You never asked if I was happy, if I was okay. You just assumed that I would always be there to pick up the pieces." Rachel looked up then, her eyes filled with guilt. "I didn't mean to. I didn't realize. I thought we were just helping each other out, you know? It's always been that way." "Exactly," Sarah replied, her heart aching with the truth of it. "It's always been about what you needed, what you wanted. And I just went along with it, because that's what family does, right? But that's not enough anymore. I can't keep living for everyone else. I've spent my whole life being the backup plan for your problems, and I can't do that anymore." Rachel's face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't mean to make you feel like that. I'm sorry, Sarah. I really am. I thought I was helping, but I see now that I wasn't. I've been so focused on what I needed that I forgot to think about you. I forgot to see you." For a long moment, There was nothing but the sound of the wind outside and the distant murmur of the kids. Sarah's chest felt tight, the weight of Rachel's words settling heavily on her shoulders. She had spent so many years waiting for this moment, waiting for Rachel to see her, to understand. But now that it had come, Sarah realized something unexpected. She didn't feel the sense of relief she had imagined. Instead, there was a strange emptiness, a hollow space where all the anger and resentment had been. "I don't know what to say, Rachel," Sarah whispered. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know if it can be fixed." Rachel reached across the table, her hand trembling as she placed it over Sarah's. "I don't expect you to fix anything. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. And I want to try to do better. I want to be better, for you and for me." Sarah pulled her hand away gently, her eyes hardening. "It's not just about being sorry, Rachel. It's about respecting my life, my choices. For the first time in years, I'm finally living for myself. And I can't let anyone take that away from me." Rachel nodded, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of the conversation had drained every ounce of energy from her. "I know. I get it now." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was different now. Not uncomfortable, but heavy with the understanding of everything that had been left unsaid. As the evening wore on, Sarah felt the pull of her old life, the one she had left behind when she made the choice to walk away from the family expectations. Rachel and the kids left just as quietly as they had arrived, their presence lingering in the air like an unspoken promise. But as Sarah stood at the door, watching them walk down the driveway, something shifted inside her. Maybe it was the guilt of seeing her sister in pain, or maybe it was the realization that this was only the beginning of something much bigger than she had anticipated. Do you think Sarah is being too harsh by drawing boundaries with her family? Or is she finally doing what's best for herself? Sarah closed the door behind her, her heart heavy with the uncertainty of the future. She knew this wasn't the end. In fact, she wasn't sure what came next. But one thing was certain. Her decision to choose herself had only just begun to unravel the deeper layers of her family's expectations. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure if she was ready for what came next. The phone buzzed in her pocket, the screen lighting up with a text from Rachel. "Can we talk tomorrow? I think we need to have a real conversation about what's next." Sarah paused, staring at the screen, feeling the weight of the words. But this time, she wasn't afraid. This time, it was her turn to decide what came next. The question now is, can Sarah truly heal her relationship with her sister, or will the distance between them grow even wider? And what will Rachel's next move be? The future felt uncertain, but one thing was clear. Sarah wasn't backing down now. Not anymore. Sarah spent the next few weeks in a fog of emotions. The house, which had once represented her freedom, now seemed to echo with the weight of her choices. It wasn't just the space around her. It was the silence that followed Rachel's visit. The feeling of disconnection lingered, as if the air had been thickened with things left unsaid, unresolved. She had chosen this house, this life, but at what cost? Rachel hadn't reached out again. There had been no further texts, no more long conversations filled with regret or promises of change. For a while, Sarah wondered if this was the price of cutting ties. The silence of a family once so tightly knit, now stretched thin and almost unrecognizable. She had thought that this was the moment of clarity, the break from the burden of everyone's expectations. But as the days went by, that clarity began to fade, replaced by something she didn't expect: doubt. It wasn't until one early afternoon, a few weeks after Rachel's visit, that the phone buzzed again. Sarah had been sitting at her kitchen table, sipping coffee, the soft clink of her mug against the saucer the only sound in the room. She glanced at the screen, expecting another missed call from her mom. There had been plenty of those. Instead, the message was from Rachel. "I've been thinking," the text began. Simple enough. But Sarah felt her chest tighten as she read further. "I want to try again, not to fix things right away, but to try to understand. I know I've made mistakes, and I'm sorry for what I did. I want to start over, if you'll let me. Sarah stared at the words, the weight of them sinking into her. She had been waiting for this moment, hadn't she? Waiting for Rachel to finally admit her wrongs, to acknowledge the hurt she had caused. But now that it was here, Sarah didn't know what to feel. She didn't know if she was ready to forgive, to let the past slide away into the warmth of sisterhood again. A flood of conflicting emotions rushed over her. The old, familiar feelings of guilt gnawed at her, the ones that had always kept her tethered to her family, always making her feel responsible for fixing their problems, for shouldering the weight of their expectations. But now, after everything, she wasn't sure who she was trying to fix it for anymore. Was it for Rachel, for her mother, or for herself? With shaking hands, Sarah typed a response. I don't know if I can just pick up where we left off. I'm not sure what you're asking for, Rachel. I've been rebuilding my life. I don't know if I can just drop everything and let you back in without knowing what you really want. She hit send before she could second guess herself. The reply came quickly. I understand. I'm not asking for everything to go back to normal. I'm just asking for a chance to prove I can be better. That I'm not the same person I was before. There it was, the olive branch. But Sarah couldn't bring herself to reach out just yet. Not because she was unwilling, but because she knew deep down that this was something they couldn't fix overnight. Rachel's change, if it was genuine, would take time, and time was something Sarah had learned to value more than anything. A week later, Sarah stood at the front of her house, looking out at the garden she had carefully nurtured, the plants now blooming with color. The little wooden house had become more than just a sanctuary. It had become her testament to freedom, a symbol of everything she had worked for. It was everything she had ever wanted, everything she deserved. She took a deep breath, feeling the fresh air fill her lungs, the peace of the moment settling in her chest. As she stepped out onto the porch, her eyes fell on the mailbox, and there it was again, another letter from Rachel. This time, Sarah opened it slowly, her fingers trembling. Inside there was a simple message. I'm trying, Sarah. I really am. I miss you, and I miss the person I thought I knew. I'm sorry for everything, for the way I took you for granted. For the first time, Sarah felt the smallest flicker of something warm inside her, a glimmer of hope, maybe. But even as that hope began to surface, she realized that forgiveness wasn't something she could give lightly. It wasn't just about accepting Rachel's apology. It was about trusting her again. And trust, well, that was a fragile thing, built over time, not easily repaired with a few words. Still, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this journey than just a broken family. There was something here about healing, about learning to set boundaries and know when to walk away from the people who had once defined you. She knew that her sister's apology wasn't the end of the story, but a new chapter, one she wasn't sure she was ready to write. Later that week, Sarah received a text from an unexpected source, Ellie. I helped Mom with her resume. She said you were the one who taught her how to start over. I think we're both trying to do better. Thanks for showing us how to do it right, even if we don't always get it. The words struck Sarah hard. It wasn't just Rachel who was changing. Ellie, too, was growing, learning to navigate the world in her own way, understanding that sometimes people needed space to grow. And Sarah was starting to realize something. Her family's expectations, her sacrifices, had always been a reflection of how little they saw her. But Ellie saw her. Maybe in time, Rachel would too. Sarah stood by the window, staring out at the blooming garden. She realized that healing wasn't just about reconciling with the past. It was about learning to live in the present, to honor the choices she had made, and to accept the person she had become. There would always be tension, always be struggles, but there was a strength in choosing herself, in standing firm on the ground she had fought so hard to claim. And then, as if the universe was giving her a final nudge, her phone buzzed again. A text from Rachel. I'm moving forward, Sarah. Not because you told me to, but because I want to. And I hope one day we can look back on this and know it wasn't just about a house. It was about finding our own way. Sarah stared at the message, her chest tightening. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was walking towards something real, something hers. How do you think Sarah will navigate the complex relationship with her sister moving forward? Can forgiveness really heal the wounds of the past? If you've enjoyed Sarah's journey, leave a 100 in the comments below. Let us know where you're watching from. What country are you tuning in from today? And don't forget to share this story with your friends. Thank you for being part of our Life Stories community.